Our social movement change strategy has three primary elements. First, change the cultural stories that frame our understanding of the nature and purpose of the economic game and its defining institutions. Second, create a new economic reality from the bottom up. And third, change the rules to support a cooperative economy devoted to ecological balance, equitable distribution, and living democracy as we shut down the old game of environmental destruction, wealth concentration, and political corruption. Let's take each of these elements one at a time. I give a lot of attention to changing the cultural stories in my role as board chair of Yes Magazine because changing the culture's defining stories is central to our mission. We have observed that every transformational social movement begins with an idea that spreads through conversation to challenge a prevailing cultural story and ultimately displace it with a new story of unrealized possibility. The civil rights movement changed the story on race. The environmental movement changed the story about the human relationship to nature. The women's movement changed the story on gender. Economic transformation depends in part on changing the prevailing stories about the nature of wealth, the purpose of the economy, and the possibilities of our human nature. Conversation, authentic conversation, is one of the most revolutionary acts in which we can engage, and we need to carry this forward. Then we have groups like the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies that are engaged in rebuilding their Main Street economies from the bottom up. They are creating from the bottom up a new economic reality of self-reliant bioregional living economies. This work includes reorienting land use patterns and transportation systems to reduce auto dependence by concentrating population in walkable, energy-efficient, multi-strata communities, retrofitting buildings for energy efficiency, rebuilding local productive capacities based on closed-loop production and consumption systems that reduce long-distance shipping, eliminate waste, increase energy efficiency, and build local self-reliance in the production of food, energy, and other basic essentials. Moving toward economic self-reliance not only increases economic stability and resilience, it also eliminates the need for war to expropriate the resources of the peoples of other countries. As bioregional communities everywhere regain control of their own resources for their own use, they can focus on organizing their economies to optimize the use of these resources to meet their own needs and have a natural incentive to maintain the health and vitality of their bioregional ecosystems. Creating the new reality in turn contributes to changing the economic story by demonstrating the potential and possibility of economies devoted to building community wealth based on cooperation, while simultaneously we are building a political base to support the third element of the strategy, changing the rules to favor new economy values and institutions. Now, I want to devote the remainder of my time to addressing some of the specifics of the policy agenda as they relate to indicators, money, income, ownership, democracy, markets, and global rules. Let's start with indicators. GDP, properly understood, is basically a measure of how fast money is flowing through the economy and generating profits for corporations and bankers. The faster that money flows, the greater their profits and the greater their control over our lives. You might also think of it as a measure of the rate of growth in our garbage dumps. You know, I think it'd be a lot easier calculation. Just measure the rate of growth of our garbage dumps. You have a great proxy for GDP. Using GDP as the leading indicator of economic performance results in a vast range of distortions that support the Hermes illusion. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with these. We get what we measure. So let's measure what we want. You know, these ideas are not so strange and esoteric. They're just real simple common sense. Children are society's most vulnerable members. If you know the rates of infant mortality, sex abuse and violence against children, child poverty and malnutrition, teenage crime and pregnancy, you have a remarkably clear picture of the society's state of health. Other useful indicators of community health include high school graduation rates, the percentage of jobs that pay a living wage with benefits, the unemployment rate among people seeking a paid job, average commuting times, attendance at farmers markets, involvement in community service. These are all indicators of community health. And we're not supposed to associate with those with the economy, but it really is the economy that determines how each of these play out, and that's part of our new learning. For natural systems, there are indicators of air quality, rates of soil runoff, biodiversity, the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, and the size of fragile fish, bird, and frog populations. Such indicators can be used at local levels as well as national and global levels. As we move forward to replace financial indicators like GDP with real living wealth indicators like the ones I've just described, we will see more clearly the benefits of reallocating real wealth resources from, say, the military to healthcare and environmental rejuvenation, from prisons to rehabilitation, from suburban sprawl to compact communities, from automobiles to public transportation, from fossil fuels to energy conservation and development of sustainable energy sources, from mining to recycling, from advertising to education, and from financial speculation to financing local enterprises. More just plain, simple common sense. You know, this kind of list is I find very useful in reminding ourselves that what we need to do is not about sacrifice, it is about putting our resources where we produce what we really want. And this brings me to the money system. The money system issues are quite straightforward if we start by acknowledging the simple truth that speculation, usury, and accounting manipulation serve no beneficial economic or social purpose. So there's no legitimate reason to allow them, period, and certainly no justification for supporting them with public subsidies from the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve. One of the things that I find really interesting is that on the issue of the need to audit the Federal Reserve and make it more transparent, it cuts totally across the entire political spectrum, from the furthest right to the furthest left. The proper function of a money system is not to support usury, speculation, and greed, but rather to facilitate the cooperative connection of underutilized resources with unmet needs. Resources, needs, produce. The purpose of money is to connect underutilized resources with unmet needs, to improve well-being and create community wealth. So if you start with the purpose and then you start thinking about how would we design a system of money creation and allocation that supports that, we would come out with a very different system. One implication: a proper financial system should make credit readily available at favorable rates to Main Street businesses that create family wage jobs producing real goods and services. It should make credit scarce and expensive for Wall Street speculators and predators, which of course is exactly the opposite of what we have now. So if we get clear on what we want as a society, outlining the basic design principles for a money system to support the new economy are pretty much just common sense.